Oga, we are the Garifuna Sistas, and we will be presenting on podcasting as a means of cultural preservation. My name is Kyleigh Simone and Cayetano. I'm the social media manager and a co-host for Garifuna Sistas Talk Spirituality podcast. I also am a university student attending the University of the West Indies, Mona campus, Jamaica. Hello, my name is Feroza Cayetano. I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm currently based in Spain teaching English, and I'm also the co-host and producer of the podcast. So a podcast is an internet radio show with the added benefit that you can listen on demand. You can listen as many times as you want. You can fast forward, you can rewind. And podcasting, they've always sort of existed in the last 10 years, but they've really gotten popular in the last couple years, especially during the pandemic. And the added benefit is that people like us can create a show, we can create what we want, rather than having to go to a radio network or a TV network to ask permission to create what we want to see. What's so great about podcasting is that the resources are out there, most of them are free, and we can create what we want to see in the world, which is what we did. I wish I had such a podcast 6 years ago.
When your journey started.
When this journey started, when I had no frame of reference, to know that I wasn't crazy and to know that the things I was experiencing, because this happens in other cultures too.
Yeah.
But specifically in Garifuna culture, like what does Garifuna cosmology have to say about ancestors and spirits and giftedness and different levels of giftedness? And you know, what is a buye? Like what are all of these things? What does it mean?
Yeah, for the person who may not have grown up knowing, like we didn't grow up knowing. We just kind of entered this world and had to navigate not entirely on our own, but mostly on our own because we don't live in Belize, where the resources would be, or, you know, in any place with a large Garifuna community.
Why did I start the show? You know, we didn't grow up in Garifuna community. We grew up my teenage years were in Jamaica. My early adult years were in Trinidad and the United States. And we always had a Garifuna household. I never questioned my Garifuna-ness. We had the music, we had the food, we had some of the language, we had the artifacts. But when it came to spirituality, that was just very, very mysterious. And I knew that it was an aspect of what we do. I knew some things like candles and setting down food and prayers. But beyond that, it was nothing. And then when I was studying abroad in Brazil, I had my experiences with spirituality, for want of a better word. And it was a tough journey. And I think part of why it was so difficult was just that I had no frame of reference. I didn't even know about ancestors and that they could, So I went through my journey and I attended a women's conference with Garifuna Nation, shout out to them. And during that conference, there was a call for, you know, what do you want to see in the Garifuna community that you could create? And then that was when I realized, well, I really still want to know more about Garifuna spirituality. What can I create? I have a phone. I have a microphone. I've got YouTube. We've got And added to that, I come from a family that knows people. And so why not use those resources, you know, internet and knowing people and having a network to create a show? But I was super freaked out. So I turned to my sister and I was like, sister called me one day, very excitedly, just like, hey, I have this idea that we should start a podcast about Garifuna spirituality. And I was like, yes, of course we should, because we've always had this relationship of discussing spirituality and what we've experienced and our shared experiences and our individual experiences. And it just felt right. It felt like a natural progression of our relationship. And unintentionally in the process, we realized that we were preserving culture, because that was not our intention initially. There were guests who came to us and listeners who came to us congratulating us and thanking us for sharing this information, because we're not the only ones who've grown up outside of community or outside of the culture, outside of where our where our heavily populated Garifuna people are, right? So it just felt right. And then the other thing is, we can't Google Garifuna spirituality. You can Google the music, the food, the language. Like, people are really creating things in those more accessible parts of the culture, which is all well and good. And really, our spirituality isn't something that should be Googled because it's very sacred, and I understand that. But as a Garifuna young person growing up in the diaspora who has our family didn't know much when I had questions, and so they had to redirect me. And so part of starting the show was, we're not the only ones. So how can we create a platform where we can learn together about the things about spirituality that everyone should know, because it's very sacred. So there are some secrets, and I've always been very clear with our guests that we're not looking for secrets. We're looking for experiences and stories that we would tell our little sisters or our friends to help guide them, because we're all Garifuna, but the idea of Garifuna identity is evolving because we are out in the diaspora, exposed to different realities. The ones in America have to deal with being African American or being Latinx. The ones in the Caribbean, me being in Europe, it's many identities juggling.
Then the British and the French were out doing what they did, colonizing, and we fought them to protect our islands.
Naturally.
The British won the war and rounded up all of us and left us on a barren island named Belize to die.
The Garifuna arrived in Roatan, Honduras from St. Vincent and the Grenadines in 1797. 4 years after this, the records show that there were at least 150 Garifuna in Belize. Now, at the time, the British were not about that life. They didn't like that. And it's said in the records, everyone is aware of the atrocities committed by these people in Grenada and St. Vincent. And there may be danger of an insurrection from these people. And so by 1811, the Garifuna people needed a permit to enter what is now present-day Belize City. There is no doubt that nowadays the Garifuna are an intricate part of Belize's cultural fabric. We're celebrated, we have our Resettlement Day. But in the beginning, we were almost immediately made separate from the rest of Belizean society. And our spirituality was demonized. This is the foundation that we're working with our podcast, because even though this initial separation was like 200 years ago, there are lasting effects. One of our guests, Garifuna drummer Joshua Arana, told us about how in his youth, while he was in high school and as a child growing up, that the music and the dance were always the popular aspects of the culture. But the spirituality...
Different guests have told us about how and why, about 70 years ago, there was a generation of Garinagu who moved away from our spirituality. This is due to the society at the time and the influence of the Catholic Church.
Ancestral worship is condemned by the church, by the Bible. And so naturally, the church does the same. But my question is, where is St. Jude? Where is St. Paul? Are they dead or they're somewhere? My ancestor, my mother, whose breast I suck, my father, who wiped away my fears, is now devil. But the saint who I don't know where he comes from, what he likes, who his parents were, I don't know at all. I am supposed to revere, honor,
Pray to
that person. I have a problem. I have a problem with that.
They were a generation of adults who had been separated for so many years because of the reality of the Garifuna at that time. If you wanted to achieve, if you wanted to succeed, you needed to distance yourself from those aspects of the culture. Of course, things have changed now, but there was a generation of Garinagu who felt that way, who had that experience. It was a choice they made because of the reality of that's what you had to do to survive. So it's not an indictment on them. It's, that behavior was necessary for the survival of our people.
Without a doubt, our music and dance aspect of our culture is definitely a part of the popular culture in Belize. But when it comes to spirituality, there are some people who are into it, or they don't want to associate at all. Some people don't want to associate out of fear and lack of understanding, and some people have simply had a negative personal experience with it, but that does not mean that that's everyone's experience by any means. Through the tailored questions which we ask each of our guests, we've tried to understand how each of them came into acknowledging and accepting their Garifuna identity, and through that, their Garifuna spirituality. This teaches us compassion, and through learning about these personal stories and experiences, we get to learn that our ancestors are also just people. We can't blame our elders for not teaching us something that they didn't know. In each episode, we interview a featured guest, typically a leader, healer, spirituality practitioner, and we ask them questions such as what it was like growing up Garifuna. That sort of leads the conversation into, well, how is it like being introduced to spirituality, or how did you come to an understanding, acceptance? And every episode we ask our guests what advice they would give to people who are struggling or searching, and we ask them, which is our favorite question, what does it mean to them to be Garifuna? Because that is different for every single person. And I believe that it is in sharing our stories, our experiences, our struggles, that we can help each other, that we can know that we're not alone, that we're not crazy. I thought I was crazy. That we're not crazy, and that there is a level of normality to our relationship with Garifuna spirituality. Everyone's journey is unique, but it is in our uniqueness and in the specificity of our stories that we can find common ground and come to a deeper understanding of ourselves. Our aim, our goal is always for people who are 35 and younger, to be honest. People who grew up outside of Garifuna community. My aim is for the people in the diaspora who didn't grow up coming back to Belize or coming back to Guatemala and Honduras every summer. The people who don't have an auntie or uncle or their mom or dad or grandma or grandpa who can explain to them things about Garifuna spirituality. And this is for people who are at home in Belize or in community abroad, but their families or the people around them aren't into that, because that's also another thing. But what's been really surprising is that we've been touching a lot of older folk, and that's outside the scope of this presentation. But for many reasons, people across the generations in the Garifuna community have very mixed experiences with Garifuna spirituality, ranging from me not into that, me not grow up with that, as one end of the spectrum, to the person that goes to Dabuyaba every summer and just goes to all of the Dugu because it's fun and there's drumming and ting ting ting, and then the people that fall in between. And we also cater to that too, because even those who grew up in community, we don't all share our stories, and I really want to create a culture where we can share and learn and grow together. We have the power to do research on our culture, have knowledgeable conversations with people who know more than we do, and share them with everyone and anyone who is willing to listen and learn along with us. Some people use YouTube, some people use Clubhouse, some people use Instagram Live or Facebook Live. We chose the platform of podcasting because it was the most accessible to us, and it's easy and free. Oh, in conclusion, listen to our podcast. Yes, it's shameless plug. Yeah, it's a journey. It has been a journey. Garifuna. You have listened to Garifuna Sistas Talk Spirituality.